What's up, everybody? Another episode on Fantasia Fest. We got 3 more movies for you today, and I gotta say, even though this isn't a festival that I'm physically attending, it still makes me just as tired as going to an actual film festival. A lot of movies. Gotta watch a lot of movies every day. Gotta do that. Gotta do that. All right, everybody. First up, we've got The Curse of Audrey Earnshaw. This is a film out of Canada playing at the Fantasia Festival. I think it maybe only played one night, but if it didn't, go check it out over on FantasiaFest.com. I should probably have that information, but I do not. So The Curse of Audrey Earnshaw, it's shot around Edmonton, and it looks it. I was watching this movie, and I knew it was Canadian, but I didn't know where it was shot, and I'm like, looks like Edmonton to me. Looks like Edmonton. This was directed by Thomas Robert Lee, his second film. Never saw his other film. I'm sure it played at film festivals somewhere. I didn't see it, though. But I was excited to see this one because it is a very interesting concept. It takes place in the 70s, but in a village. Seems like it's older. It seems like a lot older. And I think I had to figure that out later in the film because I missed some of the credit roll at the beginning that explains all of this. And it would have been very easy for me to understand this film because there's one shocking moment that that would have been good to have that information. But going into this film, it feels like a period piece. It does feel like an Amish type settlement or something along those lines. Essentially, there is what seems to be some sort of famine. The animals are dying, but there is one farm, the Earnshaw farm, that is bountiful. This land is bountiful, Cookie. This is a bountiful land we have here. Essentially, Agatha Earnshaw has been hiding a child that she had during some sort of eclipse. It doesn't get too far into the actual lore of the film. All we know is there's some sort of occult type happenings as we see the rituals. There are some sort of witchery going on as once Audrey starts moseying about town and doing some sort of witch shit, I would call it, starts doing some sort of witch shit. That's when stuff really starts to go down in this film. That's kind of a weirdly structured film. It does have like chapters, like 1, 2, 3, 4, but like they're very sporadic when they want to actually use the chapters, because like there's like a prologue, I guess you would call it, where a bunch of stuff happens. Then chapter 1, chapter 2 happens like immediately, chapter 3, and then nothing happens until like the last 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh, they didn't just abandon the chapters thing. They just didn't space them out very well, I guess. This movie is genuinely creepy and does a good job at making you wonder what's happening. It doesn't really explain much ever. It leaves a lot to the viewer to figure out, and I would argue almost too much. I don't need like a full explanation of what's happening, but like a little more. There's even a point in the movie when the mayor asks Audrey, "What are you doing here? What do you want?" She's like, "I'll just show you." And then it's a bunch of naked occultists. Like that's supposed to explain anything at all to me. I don't know. This is like, it's kind of like, it feels like it has aspects of Hereditary with like the King Feoman stuff, but like it never even gets to that. It never even gets to that much of an explanation. It just is, she is some sort of evil being that was born probably of Satan and is doing witch shit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I guess. It only kind of hints at like the witchcraft and possibly I don't know what else it would be. It's occultism and like blood drinking. So I guess maybe there's a little bit of vampire stuff going on in here because there are like a lot of dead animals everywhere. And you are wondering, is this like, what is the metaphors going on here? It has a weird washed out colors. It looks like sepia almost. It's like really washed out. I don't love that in film. I guess it does work for the time period that they're trying to portray and kind of the vibe of the movie, but I never think that like digital effect filters ever look good, like especially when you're using kind of a cheapy digital camera. I think once you put a weird like color correction filter on there, it just makes movies look weird. I guess it certainly makes the clothing and buildings look a little more realistic, I would say. but I don't know. It just feels a little off to me. And there's a lot that's off in this movie, I would say, because there's certainly a lot of great imagery, but I don't feel like there's much of a story to latch onto. Let's say there's not much of anything to be latched onto here. It kind of floats from character to character. All these people that are affected by Audrey, or just the town paranoia in general. It's kind of in the same vein of maybe like a Rosemary's Baby, like the vibe of the movie. Like there is like an undertone of something you don't really know about. But again, I don't think it explains it well enough. On the plus side, there are some good actors in this. Jessica Reynolds, who plays Audrey Earnshaw, is very good. She's going to be pretty popular, I would suspect. Hopefully she can break through. It's hard though for Canadians. A lot of them don't make it out of these like weird CBC produced Canadian films, and that's just how it is. But I do think Jessica Reynolds is very good. The rest of the cast is pretty good. Nothing too notable, but I do think that the dialogue is fairly well written, which I can't say for a lot of these indie films that I've seen from this festival. And then at some point a pickup truck shows up and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't happening like 100 years ago. This is like current. So I guess I did miss that aspect of the story, but that's okay. That really did scare me. Probably the most scary thing in this movie is when a pickup truck showed up, and I wasn't ready for that. I was not ready for a pickup truck to just show up. So to me, I'm going to have to give this one a 3 stars. I think it's worth a watch, but I think maybe some people will have issues with the kind of pacing and explanation for what is happening. Otherwise, kind of cool film, I think. All right, next up, we've got a Brea Grant double feature. Brea Grant, I know her mostly from Dexter, but she was in Heroes, I believe, and dated Kevin Pereira. Famously dated Kevin Pereira. But she's got 2 movies in this festival, so I saw that they were back-to-back, and I'm like, well, let's just watch both of these. First up, we've got 12 Hour Shift. This is the one that she wrote and directed, and it's a pretty weird one, that's for sure. It takes place in 1998 over a 12-hour shift with a junkie nurse. This is what the description says. I'm just reading it so that Fantasia Fest doesn't get mad at me when I represent these films in a more aggressive way than they want. We've had this trouble with festivals before, Cuff. Where they don't like the way we represent their films. So I'm going to be nice. I'm going to try and be nice to these films that I don't enjoy. And this one, I think, in theory, is kind of interesting. You got Angela Bates, most famous from probably that movie May. That's like a pretty cool horror movie. She's also in Girl Interrupted and The New Carrie. A bunch of other like low-budget horror movies. It also has like a kind of a weird cast. It's got David Arquette in it. It's got Mick Foley, Mankind, still looking fucked up from when The Undertaker threw him off the cage. But this is a movie about black market organ trading and kind of how the nurse sets up these things. And it also stars in kind of an insane character, Chloe Farnworth, who again, I like in stuff when I see her, but she's always in like pretty low-budget weird fucking asylum films. Anyway, she's a complete insane person fuck up that keeps losing the organs that she's supposed to deliver, and from there it kind of rolls out of control. I like seeing Mick Foley and David Arquette in this movie. Clearly they were both on set for one day and they didn't really know what to do with either of those characters. It's weird that David Arquette just exists in this movie, which is another weird overlap besides the Brea Grant thing. On the next episode, we're going to be talking about the David Arquette documentary about him wrestling, so maybe we'll get to talk more about him because he's barely even in this. I think one of the main problems with this movie is the characters aren't particularly fun to watch. They're all kind of scumbags, which is fine, I guess, for a comedy about organ harvesting, but they're all very dumb. All of the comedy seems like it doesn't seem realistic, you know, like I get that it's a dark comedy about these people organ harvesting, but like when you spend so much time just like randomly killing people in this hospital with no repercussions, I don't know how funny I find that. It just seems like they're a little nonchalant about murdering so many people. And I get that it's a horror comedy, but like, I don't know, maybe make it a little bit more grounded. It feels like some high strangeness. It does feel like they're aliens talking to each other at times. Like, I think it gets lost in the comedy that they're just like, they don't feel like real people, which to me is what makes a good comedy, is when you can ground it a little bit in reality. It doesn't have to be completely reality, but like, just ground it a little bit so that I have something to relate to. But that's not really in Brea Grant's bag of tricks, I don't think. We'll talk about that when we talk about Lucky next, too. I think it doesn't help that this movie's full of weird tonal shifts. Sometimes it's a comedy, sometimes they're dead serious about getting an organ, getting a kidney out of someone. It's kind of a bloody movie, but it's not really like... It's not like a gore. It's not like a gore movie, really. It seems like there's a good idea in here, but it's a little sloppily executed. It could have used a little tight. It's a short movie too, but it could have been tightened up a little bit, because I do feel like they spend so much time being like, I need to get this organ. Let's get the organ, and then they get it, and then they lose it again. They lose it twice. They lose a kidney twice in this movie, and it's like, one time's enough. If we're doing bits, if we're doing this bit, one time's probably enough, because then we're just treading our wheels doing this whole thing again. Overall, I think it's fine. It's worth a watch for sure, but I think your mileage will vary depending on how much you like these terrible people. 2 stars from Buck Hollywood Ledoux. All right, everybody, let's talk about Brea Grant's other movie. This one she stars in and wrote it. She did not direct it, however. That honor went to Natasha Carmani, who I guess Imitation Girl was the last movie she made. Lucky is a fairly interesting movie. Again, I feel like all of Brea Grant's screenplays, the dialogue feels like it's coming from an alien. And this is the same problem I had with 12-Hour Shift. I do like the content of this one better. I think this one's a better concept. I don't know if it was executed super well, but I think that the metaphor is strong enough in this one that it does work pretty good. So essentially this one, Brea Grant, she's a self-help writer that can't really help herself. That is always something that I find like a good concept, because so many self-help writers are charlatans. Not to say that this character is, but it does play with the fact that even if you're giving advice to someone, it's hard to take your own advice sometimes. And I think that's an interesting concept. The metaphor in this movie is about how hard it is to be a woman, just living your life, right? Because the main character, every night, a masked man comes into her house and tries to kill her, and she has to figure out ways to kill him. It's kind of like a sci-fi type movie, but it doesn't really go into that too much. It's more just like, obviously it's like a thing where it's all just in your head that this is happening, but it does kind of lose itself in the concept occasionally. To me, there's no better depiction of gaslighting on screen than maybe Gaslight from 1944, the movie that coined the term gaslighting. You all know I'm a big fan of that movie, a very good film. And this one does a very good job of that, because every time she has to tell someone that there's a man coming into her house every night trying to kill her, they all dismiss her. They're like, yeah, I'm sure he's not coming back, or he's maybe not real at all. It's all in your head, and don't worry about it. It's all going to be fine, because it is they do a very good job of making all of the male characters in this film very dismissive, including your husband, which arguably may not even exist because he's gone for so much of the movie, and then is immediately killed as soon as he shows up again. That's not really a spoiler, because he's generally just what feels like a mouthpiece for the exposition of explaining what's wrong with her from a man's point of view, and I think it does a really good job of that. The movie itself, I think, maybe leans too much in on the concept of that and doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, so much of it is her just fighting the guy every day, and it gets repetitive in my opinion. And I think the metaphor is very strong, like I've said, but I think just in concept, in execution, it's not really that fun to watch after a while. Maybe that's the point. Whether or not that's true, I think this is effective, and I think it is a much better movie than 12-Hour Shift. So I think Brea Grant has had a good festival year this year. 2 films at Fantasia Fest that played back to back. This one is available again. I saw the first screening of it, so definitely get in there on that one if you can see this one. It's worth a watch. It's pretty interesting stuff. The bad guy is a very cool looking character with like the plastic mask on it. When she takes it off, it turns into like every man that she's interacted with. It's a cool concept. I wish it was a little more polished, but I do think that it is an effective film and worth a watch. So I'm going to give this one 3 stars on the buck scale. So that's it for today. Leave a comment if you've seen any of these movies. If you want to see any of these movies, let me know what you thought. Was I wrong about them? Was I right about them? I do have a comment here from last week. This one was, it doesn't really have anything to do with the video, but I do think it is just a funny little thing. This guy said, why do you not like Quentin Tarantino? I found a link to your YouTube channel through your review of QT8, the first 8 on Letterboxd. I saw that you called him the weirdest fucker in Hollywood. Now, nowhere in that review do I think that Quentin Tarantino's bad. I think QT8, the first 8 documentary, is a very bad documentary because it does simply just have people like jerking him off, saying how great he is, and going over his Wikipedia page. Brother, I can look at a Wikipedia page. If you're making a documentary about someone, have some new information, have something interesting. And I only call him the weirdest fucker in Hollywood because he's a weird dude that likes to suck on toes, and the entirety of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is shots of women's toes. He's a weird guy. He's a weird, self-proclaimed weird guy. Says the N-word in every movie that he's in. Says the N-word. He's a weird guy. He's not a very cool guy, I don't think. He's like a weird nerd. But he makes very good movies. So that's my response to that. Not that this guy will ever watch this. He just wanted to know why I didn't like his precious Quentin Tarantino, whom I am a fan of. So if you got any comments, I will read them on here, and I will certainly respond to them, negative or positive. Go ahead and let me know what you think. You can also give us a like, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to follow us on social media at Movie Epidemic on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can always head over to movieepidemic.com to get everything that we produce over there. On Friday, we're going to be having another episode of Fantasia Fest coverage. Trek Epidemic will be moving to Sunday this week, so don't worry about that. You're still going to get Trek Epidemic for you Trek fans, and next week will be similar. So I'll see you guys on Friday. Bye.
Why don't you play us something, baby? Why don't you play us something, baby?
Start? I don't feel so good.